Hey everyone, welcome to this class. For some of you, this might be the first time hearing my voice. So, hi, this is Christina Lee. Right, welcome to this lesson on the rhetorical strategy of narration. So, this presentation is going to help you understand how narration can be used to develop ideas in your writing. So, this video should have the option under the video settings to be set to 2x speed if you'd like to listen to it a little faster. You should also be able to see captions. You can toggle the caption settings on the video. Okay, so in this course, we're exploring 9 rhetorical strategies. They are also in your textbook. So these strategies help writers develop their ideas, add meaningful detail, and express their points more clearly or effectively. So in this lecture, we're going to focus on narration, and it's a strategy that uses storytelling to make or illustrate a point. So each rhetorical strategy that we will go over, like narration, description, definition, they can be used to support and develop ideas in any kind of writing, but each of those strategies can also be a main organizing strategy for an entire essay. So for example, you could have a narrative essay, definition essay, a comparison contrast essay. So, for example, narrative essay uses storytelling as its primary method, while definition essay focuses on explaining the meaning of a concept. So, in this way, each strategy you can use as kind of like a mini tool within a paragraph in an essay. So, for example, if you are writing a argument essay, you can have a paragraph or two using narration to help prove a point. Or the strategy itself could be an entire way of organizing and structuring an essay. So today we're going to look at what narration means, what its purpose is, and how to use it effectively to build a strong narrative essay, because our first essay for this class will be a narrative essay using the description strategy as well. So what is a narrative? A narrative is simply an account of events. It's telling a story and explaining what happened and how it happened. When you write a narrative essay, ask yourself, what's my purpose? So, if a regular narrative, you might share a story for friends just to entertain them or pass the time. It can be casual, there's no structure, there's really no purpose beyond the story itself. There's often no deeper message, you're just kind of recounting events. But with a narrative essay, we tell a story with a purpose to make a point, share a lesson, or maybe reflect on an experience. So, in writing, purpose is very important. So, ask yourself, am I writing this narrative just to tell a story, to connect with others, to teach a lesson, or maybe even to persuade someone of something? So, you should always know why you're telling that specific story. So, next, think about your audience. Who are you writing for? What do they already know about your topic? What background information do they need? Right? Because we can't expect the audience to know everything. They're not in our heads, right? So some information you might have to provide beforehand before you get into your story. And knowing your audience helps you choose what details to include and how to explain them. In academic writing, most essays have a clear point or thesis. Therefore, your narrative should have one as well. But narratives don't always need to state that point directly or explicitly, but your story should still lead the reader to a main idea or message. So if we think about any story, such as like the stories in movies, there's always some greater point or message for the audience to take away. But the movie doesn't necessarily come out and say, oh, here's the message, right? So, for example, in Lilo and Stitch, we see a story, but it's not just about this alien on the run and a little girl. It's about the importance of family, belonging, love, right? Because in the movie, they say Ohana means family, and family means no one gets left behind. So that's the greater point, right, behind that film. So when you're writing your narrative, ask yourself, what's the point I'm trying to make? So, how do we develop a narrative? When developing a narrative, use the 5 W's and 1 H. So, who, what, when, where, why, and how. Be specific with your details. Help readers imagine the people, the setting, the action. For example, let's say you want to introduce a classmate in your story. Instead of just saying a classmate, think about who this person is. What's their name? What does she look like? What is she wearing? How does she walk or talk? So, the more specific you are, the more real your story becomes for your reader. But keep in mind that not every detail is necessary. Just choose the ones that matter in your story. So next, follow a clear timeline. Narratives use chronological order, events in the order they happened. You can use flashbacks, but make sure they're clear and not confusing. While chronology is important, you also need a plot. So, in a plot, your events should connect and lead from one to another. In other words, the plot is made up of a series of related events. So, you're not just recounting a bunch of events that happened one after another, they should be related. So, in your narrative, your plot should have a beginning, middle, and end. So, the beginning sets up the situation and introduces the conflict. The conflict can be internal or external, it could be both. Right, so in Lilo and Stitch, we have a combination of both. We have Lilo's external conflict. She's often fighting for Sister Nani, who's just trying to take care of her. They have social services that's threatening to separate them, and her classmates reject her. With Stitch, his external conflict is he's being hunted by these alien authorities. For internal conflict for Lilo, she struggles with feelings of loneliness, being misunderstood, right, grieving the loss of her parents. Stitch's internal conflict is that he's torn between being what he was created to be, so this kind of destructive monster, and learning how to care for others and belonging to a family. So he's kind of conflicted between those two things. So without conflict, you lose the heart of the narrative, and without it, you can't produce the struggle, climax, or resolution. So all the things that follow, right, to create a strong narrative. So the middle builds up tension by showing the struggle until it reaches the highest point, which we also call the climax. So the climax sometimes is maybe a turning point. It's when you realize something or when something changes. And the end shows what happened as a result, so how the conflict was resolved. So here's a visual representation of how to organize your essay and how to develop a good narrative essay using plot. So let's look at a fun example here. We have the Itsy Bitsy Spider nursery rhyme. So even in this little rhyme, we have a plot. So in the beginning, setting up the situation, right, we have the Itsy Bitsy Spider crawling up the water spout. Right, in the middle, we have the conflict, which is down came the rain, and the climax, which is the highest point of the story. It washes the spider out. And in the end, we have the outcome, right? So out comes the sun, dried up all the rain, and the spider climbed up the water spout again. So even in simple stories like this, they have a structure to them. Next, when developing a narrative, add transitions. So use clear transitions to guide your reader through the sequence of events. So using transitional words like next, the following week, consequently, they can help show the flow and move the narrative through time. Also, keep your verb tense consistent. Because that story happened in the past, right? It's an experience that already happened to you. It has to stay in the past. Next, make sure your point of view is consistent. So don't describe something you couldn't actually have seen or known, right? Um, you can use first person, which is I, or third person like he, they, she, but second person you wouldn't work because think about it. Who would be the you that you're referring to? The reader, but your reader wasn't a part of your story or experience. So, first and third would be the correct points of view to use for this narrative essay. Lastly, use dialogue. You don't always have to have dialogue for every single moment, but dialogue is a very useful way to make your narrative more engaging, and it can show what others are thinking or feeling in their words, not just yours, right? So, for example, instead of always saying, my mother thought I was lazy, right? What did she say to you that made you think that you were lazy, right? So, it might be better to include dialogue in that sense. Dialogue also helps show what people in your narrative are thinking rather than simply just telling your readers about it. So here's an example of a short narrative that uses many of these techniques we've just talked about. It uses dialogue, it keeps the point of view consistent, it follows a logical order, and it builds a clear plot. The story also communicates a message about self care and social anxiety.